Okay, I'm going to walk you through my backup and archive solution for how I work. It's very classroom-like, isn't it? Backup and archive. And I'm actually going to put archive in quotes because some people might argue with my definition of what archiving is. And we'll zoom in a little bit here. Okay, so I've got three elements in this, and there's actually two sets of three elements. So let's start with the first. That would be the laptop workstation with an SSD. Here, we'll even put it in its own box. Okay. So this is where I do all my primary work. This is where I do all my Pro Tools sessions, anything having to do with the Working Class Audio podcast, anything mixing, mastering oriented, everything goes here. The SSD is a Samsung, one of the T Series 5, I think, maybe 7, 2 terabytes, always stays attached to the laptop. That contains my Dropbox folder. I don't know if you know that, but you can actually decide where your Dropbox folder lives. It does not live on the laptop hard drive. It actually lives on the SSD. So I've got it set up so that anything written to that folder, which is all of my items that I just named, Pro Tools, podcasting, anything production oriented that I'm doing, goes into this drive. This drive's Dropbox then synchronizes with Dropbox. Dropbox, there we go. So Dropbox does what Dropbox does, right? It always synchronizes with this, no matter what. And therefore there's one copy, there's two copies, so 2 copies. But there's a third element to this because we like to work in threes, the power of 3, right? So the Dropbox then synchronizes to a NAS. This is a local network attached storage unit that I've got actually in my closet, connected to my network, and it's running its whole independent operating system in a set of drives, 5 drives. And if two of the drives can fail ultimately, and I can replace those 2 drives without losing any data. So here's what happens. I've got Dropbox also synchronizing with the NAS. So the minute I put something on the SSD, it goes to Dropbox, and then Dropbox deposits it here in the NAS. So there's always 1 copy, 2 copies, 3 copies of everything I do at any given moment. And this is for current stuff. This is for stuff I'm actively working on. So that is the first set of 3. So let's go into the next page. And before I draw the next set of 3, I'm going to explain something. So inside, let's say we have a window here with, let's say that this is a window inside the operating system of the NAS. And in there are basically a couple folders. The client folder, that's a long-term storage thing. And then, of course, the Dropbox folder that I synchronize everything to as I'm currently working on it. So at some point, the Dropbox folder is going to fill up, or the project's going to come to an end, and I'm going to need to put it away, but I want to keep it. So what I do is I'll transfer items from the Dropbox folder to the client folder. Really simple. Just go into the operating system of the NAS, which is its own separate computer-like window accessible through a browser. Many people make them. I use one from Synology. So we'll take that. Let's say we have a mixing project. I move the mixing project from the Dropbox folder to the client folder. Well, let's go back here for a second. When I do that, that means that the way I have the NAS set up, it will communicate then to Dropbox and say, hey, there's a folder that's been moved, so take it out of Dropbox. Dropbox will then say, hey, SSD, we're moving on from whatever that project is. So let's go ahead and take it out of here. So the minute I move it from the Dropbox folder into the client folder, it disappears from here and here. But it's still inside here, inside the NAS. So where does that take us? So let's assume that we've dragged and dropped a mix project or whatever it is, a podcast from Dropbox to client folder in the NAS. So the next step is going to be, let's put our NAS up here. The next step is going to be the long-term storage of those files. So the NAS has a client folder. That client folder, very much like the SSD communicating with Dropbox, is going to communicate with cloud storage in the form of, I don't know if I'll be able to fit it. Can I fit it? Backblaze. There we go. Well, not quite. Backblaze B2. So this is very similar in terms of, let's see, I think Amazon's is called Glacier, or sometimes I'm spacing on the name. It's not important. Anyways, Amazon has a very similar type of storage, cloud storage, that's meant for long term. It's generally lower priced. This is one of the better priced versions out there that I found. So I have the NAS immediately synchronize the client folder with all the mixes and all the other stuff. There's also a podcast folder that does the same thing. Synchronizes long-term storage to this cloud storage with Backblaze. And you might say, well, hey, don't we need 3 copies? Well, we do. And as it turns out, I've got an external hard disk drive attached to the NAS. And the NAS has a separate script that says it's going to back up everything in the client folder every day to the external hard drive. So we have copy 1, copy 2, copy 3. These 2 are local. This is, of course, outside of my studio and home, but I've got 3 copies. Then you might say, well, what if you have to recall something that you worked on in the past? Well, that's very simple. We just come back here and I can copy right back to the Dropbox. That's a terrible arrow, but you get the idea. I can copy right from the client folder to the Dropbox. I can even actually just copy it to the desktop, make a quick fix, and then send the updated files back to the client folder. There's a number of ways you could do it. So let's review. The day-to-day work happens like this. I write to the SSD synchronizes with Dropbox. Dropbox then synchronizes with my local NAS. 3 copies as I'm currently working. When I'm done, I'll drag files from the Dropbox folder into the client folder. And by doing so, that causes the NAS to synchronize with Backblaze for long-term storage and synchronize with the external hard drive attached to that, to the NAS, as a third form of backup. And the bonus is, I don't know if it's a bonus. I certainly don't want to be in this position, but let's say that there's a fire or there's something. I can quickly just unplug this hard drive and run out with it if I have time, obviously. Excuse me. If I don't, no problem. I've got it all in Backblaze. This can burn up. This still exists. I can get at this from my phone, from another computer, any way I need to, from another device. So that way, I'm protected. But it's nice to have a copy of it locally, because sometimes I'll need to pull a mix and send it to somebody, and I can do that quickly here. So I hope that helps. I hope that gives you a glimpse into how I do it. And also, I want to be clear: this Backblaze B2, too much coffee. This Backblaze B2 is a different kind of Backblaze service that, when compared to that other service that they advertise all the time that I typically promote on Working Class Audio, that other service is a system where you've got to have, a computer with an external hard disk drive or SSD, and it will synchronize to Backblaze for, I think, a certain amount of money per month. But the drives always have to be connected to the computer. So this is not that. This is a different service. This is a pay-as-you-go service, or pay what you use, and this is like a flat fee. And this is useful, but I'm using this, I think, and it works better for me. So that's that. I hope that's useful. Thanks for listening.